unmute yourself?
Today is Friday, September 8th, and in a case that has already seen more than its share of historical developments, well, there is another one today. I'm Tim Darnell from the First Alert Desk from Atlanta News First here in our Midtown Atlanta studios, and we are joined this afternoon by attorney J. Edward Shipp. And we are talking about an event that happened maybe just a little over 90 minutes ago. The entire Fulton County Special Grand Jury report into alleged interference by former President Donald Trump and 18 of his Republican allies in their alleged attempts to overturn Georgia's lawful 2020 election has been released. This is a special grand jury report that has been of intense media and public interest for several months. Earlier this year and last year, Atlanta News First joined with several other Georgia media organizations seeking the full release of the full report up until today, up until around 10 a.m. today on Friday. Only a small portion of that report, which was heavily redacted, had been released. Now we are seeing the full details of the more than 2-year special grand jury investigation into what Bonnie Willis claims is a vast criminal conspiracy to overturn Georgia's 2020 presidential election results, led by none other than the nation's 45th president himself, Donald Trump. And J.M., we're still here in our studios. You know, we've had a little over an hour to fully digest this report. There are 39 people who were named in this special grand jury report, 19 of whom have now been criminally indicted under Georgia's RICO Act for alleged attempts to overturn Georgia's election. First question, 39 people, 19 invited or indicted. What happened to the other 20?
Hey, thanks for having me on. I guess we could start out by answering that question with a lot of prosecutors, they don't like to take a case all the way to trial if they feel that they cannot meet the burden of reasonable doubt at trial. And in this particular case, you know, when you have 20 unindicted people, it's more than likely that District Attorney Willis felt that she couldn't meet the burden for those 20 individuals to ensure a conviction at trial for them. Now, if she were to take them to trial and they were able to get an acquittal, their defense has a playbook at that point that they can share with other co-defendants and show them, okay, this is how you are able to beat these charges. And that's what the prosecution doesn't want. She wants to be able to have, you know, those convictions all the way around, because she wants to show that this is not a political thing. This is just a case of individuals breaking the law that just happen to be political laws. Now, you know, segueing into that, it is quite possible that she also said, you know, some of these names like Lindsey Graham, you know, Burt Jones, she probably said to herself, I don't want to make this look like it is overtly a political witch hunt, because she already knew that this was former President Trump's MO. This is what he does. He calls everything a witch hunt. He says that it is political persecution, things of this nature. So she probably had to, say to herself, I don't want to make this look like an overt political witch hunt, but I do want to make sure that those who were egregious in their violations of Georgia statutes are brought to justice. And by, trimming that down from the 39 to the 19, I think she's done a pretty good job at that.
Some of those 20 names that you mentioned just a few moments ago. U.S. Senator Lindsey Graham, a senior member of Congress from our neighboring state in South Carolina, a sitting, lawfully elected Lieutenant Governor, Georgia, Burt Jones, 2 former Georgia United States Senators, David Perdue, Kelly Loeffler, a former National Security Advisor at the White House, Michael Flynn. These are some of the names who are mentioned in the grand jury report but are not indicted, and yet the district attorney did indict Donald Trump, Rudy Giuliani. We have a sitting state senator here in Georgia, Sean Still, Republican from Norcross. Why those figures and not some of the other individuals who I just mentioned?
I think if you take a look at the report, it shows that most of their charges were almost like collateral damage in a sense. They came in speaking specifically about Lindsey Graham. He made a phone call. This isn't much different from Mark Meadows or even, former President Trump himself. However, with that, Lindsey Graham did his more under the guise of it being a political maneuver, not necessarily a law-breaking maneuver. And even though, a majority said to go ahead and indict him, again, I think that, District Attorney Willis wanted to make sure that she would be able to carry that burden all the way to trial. You don't want to get stuck in a quagmire of, is this a political thing? Are you only, attacking these people because of their political affiliations? And when you have, so many, let's call it for what it is, so many Republicans who, were involved in this, it does tend to look political to those on the outside who don't necessarily understand the intricacies of what these people found out in the special purpose grand jury. However, again, these people obviously violated Georgia statutes, and a special purpose grand jury felt that they did. Now, one thing that we should take note of is this special purpose grand jury had no binding on whether or not these people were actually indicted. They could only give a report on who they thought should be indicted. Again, this had to come up before an actual grand jury, and it's quite possible that all of this was given to the actual grand jury, and the actual grand jury said, hey, you know what, we don't think that this is necessarily going to be, enough for a probable cause, so we're going to go ahead and say no bill on this. It is quite possible for that. But again, that is something that may be found out, on down the line, years on down the line. It may not be found out at all. But again, even though District Attorney Willis has her, discretion in who she wants to bring in front of the grand jury, I'm pretty sure she's took a good look at all of these names and said, okay, this person may not be able to carry the burden, but this particular individual over here, he should be able to carry the burden, and I believe we'll be able to sustain a conviction on this particular individual.
Now, that distinction you just made is very interesting. Let's remind everyone that what was released today was the special purpose grand jury report recommending indictments for 39 individuals, some of whom are very high profile, and yet the actual grand jury, which was convened just a few weeks ago, earlier this summer, decided to pursue indictments of only 19. What are the chances that First of all, let's talk about the difference between a special purpose grand jury and the actual grand jury itself. A grand jury does not have to follow the recommendations of a special purpose grand jury. Am I correct?
That is correct. That is completely correct. The special purpose grand jury, they are there to investigate and to come up with a report and, determine whether or not charges should be pursued as far as the regular grand jury. They came in, they investigated, they heard from witnesses, they heard testimony, and they, had a report done that showed, okay, these are 39 individuals who we believe broke Georgia statutes. So this is who we are recommending that, you get an indictment on. Again, it could have been given to the regular grand jury that was seated, and they could have taken a look at all 39 of those names and said, okay, well, we don't believe that this is actually enough. We don't believe that this is actually enough in this particular individual, so we're going to drop these names. But, when you have something like a phone call that's recorded and has been heard, throughout the world, it's hard to say, okay, we're not going to indict on that one. So you could see how Donald Trump would be indicted, and Mark Meadows, who was also on that call, could be indicted as well. You have this evidence of them trying to get a slate of fake electors, and you have evidence that they tried to get false statements to be certified, false statements to even be given. So you have all this evidence that, in the prosecution's eyes, undeniably links them to breaking these statutes, and they're going to say, hey, we're going to go ahead and get an indictment on these. It might have been a little bit more shaky with these other unindicted co-conspirators.
We are covering today's major breaking news from our First Alert desk here in Atlanta News First. The full, final special grand jury report into alleged election interference by former President Donald Trump and his 18 GOP allies. We're happy to be joined in our Midtown Atlanta studios by local attorney J. Edward Shipp. And we've been showing, our producer Maria Moreau has been showing clips of Fulton County Superior Court Judge Robert McBurney during our conversation. There's kind of an interesting difference here. Robert McBurney's Superior Court Judge courtroom has been in charge of decisions regarding the release of the special grand jury report itself, while his colleague, Judge Scott McAfee, is overseeing the actual indictments themselves. Now, we knew a couple of weeks ago that Donald Trump and the other 18 co-defendants were set to be arraigned earlier this week on Wednesday, September 6th. Robert McBurney set the date for the release of this report, pending any objections, for 2 days later. Any commonality, any connection between those two dates?
It could be argued that there is a connection between those two dates. It could be argued that, at arraignment, the statute says that, you're supposed to be given a witness list, things of this nature. So one could argue that these people who testified at the special purpose grand jury could be witnesses. And it could be argued that, hey, if we just get this witness list, we need to go a little deeper and figure out, why are these people on this witness list? So with that being said, it could have been timed that way. However, this is Fulton County. Sometimes things have no rhyme or reason for why they are scheduled or when they are scheduled. It just happens to fall on certain days. But I'm beginning to lean more into the idea that Judge McBurney decided, okay, well, hey, since they're going to have to give up a witness list, let's go ahead and release this afterwards, and then, that gives them a chance to see what testimony may have been elicited during that special purpose grand jury.
Now, yesterday we reported that former President Trump's new primary lead attorney here in Georgia, Stephen Senow, has notified Fulton County Superior Court that the former president may, and we emphasize may, attempt to sever his case, or rather to move the trial of his indictment from state court in Fulton County to a federal court. Several other defendants have been making this motion as well, including his former White House Chief of Staff, Mark Meadows, and I believe former GOP chair here in Georgia, David Schaefer, along with several others. How do you see that process playing out?
I see that it could possibly happen if they are able to show that what was done under the color of being a federal official. However, to do so, that would say that they violated the Hatch Act. And I don't know if that's the smartest plan of action for them to go about. I mean, it's one thing to say, okay, hey, I was acting under the color of law, but I violated another law while I was doing that. That's kind of a shaky and risky way to go about it. I know why they're trying to do it. They're trying to get a different jury pool, of course. But, again, is it really the smartest thing to do? That's up for debate.
Now, on August 24th, if my memory is serving, that was the day that former President Trump arrived in Atlanta to be booked and photographed and fingerprinted at the Fulton County Jail. That same day, Congressman Jim Jordan, who is a Republican from Ohio, who is also the chair of the House Judiciary Committee, sent a letter to Fulton County DA Fonnie Willis, several pages demanding answers in terms of whether or not she coordinated her investigation of the former president with the U.S. Justice Department, demanding to know whether or not her office has received any federal funds from the DOJ or congressional aid whatsoever. Yesterday, one of our top stories on Atlanta News First was the DA's response to the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, and you and I, we were talking about this before we went on air. This is a 9-page letter that she sent to the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, one of the most influential congressional representatives on Capitol Hill, in so many words, telling him that he really needs an education in the American jurisprudence system, and basically telling him to stay out of her Trump investigation. This was extraordinary.
Yes, it was quite extraordinary. You have to think about it in terms of politics. This is Jim Jordan appealing to his base, trying to, basically bully a state prosecutor into handing over documents. However, in any way you look at it, it looks like obstruction. You want the prosecution office to hand over you, who is supposed to be a quote-unquote neutral third party, basically what they're doing and their game plan. That makes no sense whatsoever. Again, she pointed out that Jim Jordan, in so many words, he is a lawyer, but he hasn't sat for the bar. So she pointed that out to him. Hey, you may need to, freshen up your skills on how prosecutorial, how it goes, how all of this works, because obviously you don't know how it works. You're just, shouting into the void by asking for documents that are privileged at this point. And again, I'm pretty sure that, Jim Jordan has people around him who have told him, hey, this may play up with your base, but you're not going to get too far with it. He tried this in New York. I believe eventually they acquiesced, but again, Atlanta has been very vocal in their response by saying, if you care so much, what about, giving money to at-risk youth? If you care so much, what about making sure that we have enough funding to try these cases? If you care so much, why don't you make sure that we have enough funding for, some of our victims who have been, attacked by domestic violence or whatnot? And, it was just basically a 9-page letter of, don't test me because I can, basically outmaneuver you legally in millions of ways. And I believe that played up well with her constituency, as well as those who are concerned about state sovereignty and the overreach of the federal government in, trying to stick their hand in an ongoing investigation that's pretty much getting ready to be tried.
One of her other stronger recommendations, I believe she sent examples
Yes.
of the many death threats and racist threats that her office has received
Right.
from all of this. And, again, saying if Congress cares so much, how about taking steps to ensure the physical safety of those of us who are conducting what we believe to be lawful inquiries?
Exactly. And I think she pointed out the hypocrisy of, individuals such as Jim Jordan who come in and say that they care so much about, states' rights and, things of this nature. And they come in and basically try to overreach and say, well, we don't think you're doing this correctly. We're going to take a good look at what you're doing. And even though, again, it plays up for his base, it sends a chilling message to other state prosecutors on, if the federal government can come in and derail your whole investigation just because it's their particular candidate who is being investigated, what message did that actually send? By her saying, you could invest more time and more resources into protecting people who are for law and order, since you are the law and order party, let's see you do that. And I'm interested to see what his response will be. I'm pretty sure, it'll be full of sound bites. But again, her letter, well crafted. I have to give it an A+. Hey, that was a great one. Great job, District Attorney Willis, on that one.
And let's keep talking about Fulton County DA Bonnie Willis. This is her investigation. This is a very high-profile RICO organized crime-related trial. Not the only one that she has going right now. Also in Fulton County Superior Court, Chief Judge Earl Glanville's courtroom. The trial of Jeffrey Williams, a.k.a. Young Thug. Mm-hmm. Bonnie Willis is the centerpiece of a lot of these investigations. And earlier this year, the Georgia General Assembly, led by Republicans, and passed a bill signed by Republican Governor Brian Kemp to create a so-called Prosecuting Attorneys Oversight Council. I believe that's the correct terminology. Where perhaps quote-unquote rogue district attorneys could be subject to sanction or dismissal or disciplinary action if they are not following the laws or the wishes of their constituents. Governor Brian Kemp said, I believe a week ago, that there will be no specially called legislative session to consider sanctions against the Fulton County District Attorney. And yet State Senator Colton Moore is still, who is the primary architect of this effort to investigate Fulton County DA Bonnie Willis, is not letting this issue go. What are we looking for as far as future developments along these lines?
Well, let's unpack everything that you just stated. We have a situation in which, outside forces are coming in trying to tell the Michael Jordan, the LeBron James, the Tiger Woods of RICO indictments how to do this. And it just looks crazy. You have someone who has done this numerous of times with Atlanta Public Schools, with YSL, with she just got the indictment against PDE organization. You have someone who has made their bread and butter by doing this, and you're coming in trying to tell them how to do it. And now you have individuals such as State Senator, is he a senator or representative? I can't.
Don't quote me on this. I'm going to stay with state senator.
Okay,
I'm
okay.
probably wrong.
Well, yeah, you got him coming in and he's trying to say, well, she's not doing her job right. How do you know? I mean, this is not something that I'm aware that he's ever done. I'm not aware of him even being an attorney. So, you have people who are on the outside looking in, basically armchair experts, coming in trying to, overstep what has been already decided by the state constitution, trying to remove a duly elected district attorney just for political gain and making statements to inflame their base, to try and get these people to believe that this is the right way to go. You can't have it both ways. And I believe that's what a lot of, Mr. Trump's base is going to have to come to grips with. They're going to have to realize that, you can't say you're the party of law and order and turn around and try to do things of this nature. So, even though I believe the senator had called for, civil war and saying he might have to take up the rifle, we all know that no one in America wants to go through another civil war, brother against brother, father against son, that type of thing. Nobody wants to go through that. And that's very inflammatory for them to continue to call for this, all for, the host of The Apprentice. But again, we're looking at a situation in which, they have to play up these things for their base. They have to try and do what they can to make sure that they continue to get campaign money. But I believe that they're, barking up the wrong tree with a district attorney such as District Attorney Willis, who has proven numerous times that she knows what she's doing with these RICO indictments. Even though I'm a criminal defense attorney, I have to give credit where credit is due. She has done this before. This is not her first rodeo. So, any inclination that she might not be doing this and it might not be on the up and up is, very shaky indeed.
We are leaning into our noon hour, and we encourage all of you, all the many viewers and the wonderful comments that are being made on our YouTube stream, to continue our coverage and to stay with Atlanta News First as we move into our noon newscast. And these are historic developments. We're watching American history unfold and living in very interesting times. Thanks to local criminal defense attorney based here in Atlanta, J. Edward Shipp, for joining us at our First Alert desk in Midtown Atlanta. Stay tuned for Atlanta News First and our noon newscast. Thanks for watching.
Thanks for having me.